Hello.
Hey everyone, Nick Taylor, host of the Nick Taylor Horror Show, where I interview horror filmmakers, and this is a tremendous honor. Really, really happy to be here. Huge thanks to Metrograph and Joe Krings for welcoming me here, and it's a great honor to be speaking with you both here tonight. So first of all, I don't think I have to convince an ace audience that movies can live and die by their edit. But in this case, I think it was a franchise. So first and foremost, I want to thank both of you for having such a heavy hand in crafting something that is so significant to so many of us. So thank you both, first of all.
Thanks.
So it's roundabout 1984. There's an up-and-coming filmmaker named Wes Craven and a movie called, shout out to Wes, dearly beloved. And there's a movie called Nightmare on Elm Street on the way, and you were both brought in. New Line was going through something fairly interesting at that time. It was a very big deal, this movie for New Line. Could you both paint us a picture of what your entry point was into this movie?
Sure. Well, New Line was in trouble. They were basically going bankrupt. And this was a huge gamble for New Line, and it was really Bob Shaye who was the head of the company. Wes had shopped this script all over Hollywood, and New Line was the only one that took it on. But they were sort of in financial trouble, so everything was riding on this. And the other thing that was going on was that Wes and Bob Shaye were very competitive, so I was basically first interviewed and hired by Bob Shaye, and then of course he said, well, you have to speak to Wes and he'll interview you, and hopefully it'll go well, and it did. And so that's really the basis, and then they gave me the schedule, and we started shooting, and it was already well into June. They were finishing in July and releasing right after Halloween, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to deal with this situation with these two men and get the film cut and everything else that went with it. So I gave Pat a call, and New Line was happy to hire him. And so we basically cut the film together during that whole period when the production was happening.
Yeah, I had just come back from doing a film in California, and I was, my wife was doing a television show, and I wanted to stay in New York, and Rick called up. Rick and I had worked together for 2 years before, a couple of years before that. I had hired him, and we worked on a TV series together. I knew him, I trusted him, we were family. And so when he called me on this, and he was really up against it, the schedule was ridiculous. For what goes on there is so much in terms of editing, and I mean, and it's a low budget film. It's not like they had, 6 months worth of coverage. They really didn't. And so he called me up. I read the script. I thought, well, it's kind of cool and different, but really this genre was just getting going. And then I started, it was his gig. I came on, I believe, after the first week of shooting, and then I stayed through working with a week with Wes and Bob Shaye and feeling that tension. And then I was gone, and Rick finished it up. But we worked together during the shoot, yeah.
And I know that Bob Shaye had a heavy hand in the overall editing directive. You said he was basically competing with Wes Craven, but what was the editorial directive from Wes Craven when you first jumped on board? What were the conversations like?
There wasn't that much. Wes is the kind of, or was the kind of director where you could see his intention through the script that he wrote and the dailies that he delivered. And that's always wonderful for an editor when it's quite clear from the dailies, not exactly how to put it together, but what the director is going after. And so we would send him material every week, In those days, we had to make a video of the cut and send it out to the coast where he was shooting. We were separated coast to coast, and he would give me a little bit of feedback, but basically he really liked what we were doing, and we continued in that vein through the shoot. Bob, they had never done a big feature before at New Line, and he was very nervous, I would say, and concerned about making the date and getting the film in shape. So he would come by sometimes, always a difficult situation for an editor, and look at the scenes, and he approved them. He was kind of happy with how it was turning out as well. But he wanted us to get down to time, and that was a constant pressure, lose dialogue, make it play faster, and the director hadn't seen the cut yet, so that was a hard situation to deal with.
I just want to say, you're talking about your cues in terms of getting it from Wes. Wes was speaking to Rick. I took my cues from Rick, and I told Rick this the other day. The first scene that I saw that Rick had cut once I started was Nancy falling asleep in school. And I was like, whoa, this is so much better than the script. And well, not that the script isn't a good script, but you really can't tell how it's going to be executed. And it was so beautifully cut. I remember walking into Rick and saying, this is... So I took my cues from Rick, and that's how I approached it.
So I know we obviously have multiple editors in the room. It's not an enviable position to be getting directives from two competing people. What were some of the keys to navigating that sort of a situation where you have to appease multiple, well, let's say egos for lack of a better term, but multiple different points of direction, some of which conflict while keeping the movie on track?
Well, Wes was a great director, really, for this genre especially. And once he came in the cutting room and he had a command of what he wanted to do, there was no question in my mind, and the week that Pat was there, who was in charge and whose vision we were trying to realize. And, you know, Bob was helpful in that he was very strong about getting good elements for the film in terms of opticals. He basically found the composer, Bernstein, Charles Bernstein, who I think did an amazing job. And, you know, and so, you know, he was very assertive in terms of getting the film what it needed. But he and Wes would clash sometimes about how to go with certain scenes, and I always tried to take Wes's lead. He was the one who was the horror meister and written the script and really knew what he was doing.
And I know you had a very short amount of time comparatively to edit the movie, and there was a lot of pressure, and time was not on your side, so you had to edit very, very quickly. And the movie to this day flies like a bullet. I mean, it just still rips, no pun intended. But so I'm wondering, is there any, I know nobody likes working under those circumstances, but is there any benefit to working under pressure in that regard, you know, having had a very illustrious career after this movie?
I don't know. What do you think, Pat?
Well, I think what I liked about it was you and I had both worked in television. You and I both started in features and did a bunch of features as assistants and associates. But we worked in television, and television at that time, you would do 26 episodes a year, and they took a week and a half to shoot, but they went on every week, so the schedule got tighter, tighter, tighter. And Rick and I both had been under that kind of pressure. Cutting the first pass on this film, with that kind of time pressure and having the two of us together, I think benefited it, because we got it so far. You know, I know Wes and Rick took it to the next level, but what they saw as a rough cut was pretty darn good. It was a good place to start.
True.
And I know there's a story between watching one of the early cuts where Wes was seeing it for the first time, but there were
Yeah.
also some other people in the room that maybe shouldn't have been. Would you mind telling us that story?
Yeah, that was a first for me. So I'm not sure what it came out of, but it was the first cut, which, of course, is a very nervous time for the editor and particularly nervous for the director to see the whole film together for the first time. In those days, it was generally in a screening room, and nobody quite knew how it would turn out, what the director's reaction would be, etc. So Bob Shea not only decided to come to the screening himself, but he loaded up the theater with employees of New Line, with trailer people, marketing people. I can't imagine what Wes thought when he walked into that room, because he didn't even know the two of us, really. And he was sitting right next to me. We were screening at 1600 Broadway, and the first 5 minutes, I had kind of made a mistake as an early editor in losing some dialogue that I didn't think was necessary. And Wes saw this in the screening, wasn't sure what was going on, and told me that this was not allowed by DGA rules in the back of the theater while the screening was going on. So we were not off to a good start, but luckily the film played well, and it took us about, that week that Pat was there was kind of rough. It took me about a week to bond with Wes, and he turned out to be a wonderful guy to work with. But we were off to a rocky start, and I'm glad we had the time to come together, and it was a great experience.
Just to add to that, yeah, I helped Rick in the assembly, but I also encouraged him to take those scenes out, or those, So I was not a help in that regard at all.
So that was the first screening. Could you tell us what it was like seeing the movie in a packed theater for the first time with a live audience?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure other editors have had this experience, but we were in a very small room at 1600 Broadway, no windows. Pat was squeezed into a particularly small room and constantly under time and money pressures. And it's a low-budget film, and you're doing the best you can. You go home tired every night, and then you have a big screening. The first screening we actually had with a big audience was when it was finished, and what an amazing result to see how people participated, what it hit a nerve, I think, because of the whole dreams being inhabited scenario that Wes had thought of. And all of a sudden, it was a kind of a phenomenon created in this little room working hard every day. So it was a wonderful outcome.
Was there ever a moment watching the movie when you kind of realized, okay, it's a hit, like through audience reactions or anything along those lines?
I think the first, my wife at the time was teaching school, and we had a sort of a family and friends screening, and we wanted to see how younger people would respond, and probably her class was too young, but they loved it. So that was the first inkling I had. It seemed kind of like a roller coaster ride for them.
For me, it was, the screening, as I remember it, was at the Mann Theater at like 46th on Broadway. It was a huge theater. The first, like, it was I don't know if it was the premiere or the sneak preview, I can't remember, it was so long ago. But Rick was talking about how people were talking back to the screen. Don't fall asleep, he's under the bed. And it was real audience participation, and I felt in that moment, it took till that moment. I thought it was a good little film. I thought it might make its money back. But in that moment, without, like 1,500 people in a theater talking to the screen, that's when I thought.
I've heard multiple people who knew Wes Craven describe him as being unbelievably kind and a very sweet, good-hearted person. You'd never believe that Last House on the Left came from somebody that wonderful and sweet. And I recall you both talking about working with him was a very ego-free process. Like, he was very much kind of professorial, but
Yes.
still was able to get a lot of amazing work out of people. And I feel like it's a real lesson, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that directors or leaders in Hollywood have to be taskmasters, and that was not Wes Craven. And
No.
look at what he's done. Look at the body of work.
Yeah.
So from that experience, are there anything for filmmakers listening that they should consider? Any keys to properly working with an editor that you learned from Wes Craven?
I don't know. Sometimes the best directors turn out to be the best people. I think it shows up in their films sometimes. I had the pleasure, luck to work with Bob Fosse a bit. I was an assistant with Coppola, and these were mensches. I don't know exactly what to say, but sometimes when you get to the plateau that you're aiming for, you find that these people are really wonderful artists and collaborative.
I agree with what Rick says. I didn't really work with Wes. I mean, I met him just for that 1 week, and Rick really did work with him and get to know him. I did work with John Carpenter many times after that, and a lot of other nice directors. And I agree with what Rick says, that generally the really talented, often the really talented directors are very kind.
One thing about Wes, though, is he was kind and professorial, but when we got into editing a scary scene, he got a sort of a gleam in his eye. You saw the horror meister come out, which was important for the movie. He had grown up in the Midwest, and he was not permitted to go to the movies. I think his father was a minister. And so he said, this was my revenge.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like you're touching on an interesting point. I'd love to know, you both have worked on multiple horror projects. I'd love to know your thoughts on the editorial language of fear. How does properly editing a horror movie differ from other genres? Because I think it's arguably one of the most difficult things to create through the editorial process is fear, is scares, and the type of pacing that requires is very, very serious and requires a lot of attention. What is it like crafting fear editorially?
Well, yes, there are two, horror and comedy, both are really reliant on timing. And that is true, and you have to work on that, and also be unpredictable. It's really important not to just wait, and then spring something. It's good to be unpredictable. What I remember, I was working with John Carpenter once, and he was giving an interview, and I was listening, and he said, I can make people jump anytime I want by putting a white flash and a loud bang in. But if I really want them to be scared, I have to make them care about the people. And as far as the movies that I like that are scary, that's at the heart of it, is having, setting the people up so that their fight is your fight.
They say if you don't care, you don't scare.
Yeah.
I also think there is kind of an art to finding exactly the right frame for a jump scare or something like that. Wes was kind of a master at that, and whenever I hadn't hit it, and it's very, very much in terms of pacing and exact timing, it was actually easier to edit on a moviola than on an Avid in some ways, rhythmically, because we had a break, and you could hit exactly the right frame. So he'd be standing there with me, and we'd both kind of go, "Oop," like that. And if, sometimes he'd be a little ahead or a little later, and so I would go with that. But sometimes I would hit with him in unison, and you just get an instinct about when is the exact right moment to scare people after a long build. And it's, I don't know, I think it's kind of musical, actually.
Does it rely more on intuition as opposed to like science or clinically observing
Yes.
pacing? It is.
Yeah, it's more about feel. Although, Wes, you can see from the way the movie is formed that he had a very good instinct about how to build things. But I think the actual moments are very instinctual. And one of the nice things about editing a horror movie, you know, you go to a preview, it's sometimes hard to tell how the audience is reacting. But in a scary movie, if you have a jump that's working, you see a bunch of heads bob.
Instant feedback.
That's reassuring.
Yeah. Well, I know we're getting low on time, and I want to try to keep things open for questions from the audience, but obviously we do have editors in the room. You both have had very illustrious careers. Any advice for working editors, aspiring editors who might be listening?
I would say, in spite of the time pressures and the politics you're dealing with, try and have fun with the material, because that's really what made this worth it. And it kind of comes through, I think, in the movie that we were having fun making it work.
I would add just try to have fun, because there's so much, it's so hard these days. You know, a lot of editors, especially on these really big films, are getting fired and replaced because they think, well, if film's not working, a producer can look like a hero by replacing the editor with another editor, and or getting them to do what they want them to do. But it's, you know, there are a lot of editors here tonight, and it's hard emotionally, because the demands, you know, this machinery is so fast now, the demands to get it done, and your life goes by. What I really am grateful for is this night. Rick and I were friends a long time ago. We haven't seen much of each other for a long time. But, you know, the fact that we were able to work together so friendly and so well for 2 years before we did Nightmare on Elm Street, and then this, it's such a great memory for me.
Oh, that's great, Pat. And looking now, I can't even remember which scenes were your first cut and which were mine, you know, and it kind of seamless. So we really got on the same page, which is so important if there's more than one editor.
Right. Do we have time for questions? All right, great. We're going to open it up to questions from the audience.
I have a question about one of the cuts you made for the rating to prevent it from getting an X. In the uncut version, so mainly what was cut was the Rod and Tina scene, her death scene, where they cut her open. But there is one extra cut at the end when they sing, you know, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, and they're doing the jump rope. There's like a few frames that were cut for the rating. I have a theory that it was because, the MPA maybe saw that, oh, they cut enough, let's just let it pass, and then you got all that gory goodness in.
Honestly, it wasn't, as far as I know, it wasn't intentional. Their emphasis was on the Tina scene, and that did have to be cut down on her on the ceiling.
Thank you for your work. Absolutely incredible film. I love the transition from when you go from the Marge's corpse to just an empty bed. It was seamless.
You know, one of the fun things for me, and the fun things in those days, was that all the effects were practical. They had to make them, and since we weren't in Los Angeles, we'd get the dailies and we would try and figure out, how did they do this? You know, was that fun for you guys?
Yep.
I figured out the tongue right away.
All right, I think we have time for one more.
What scene did you guys have the most fun cutting, or the most fun with? What was the most fun for you on this project that turned out to be incredibly fun?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say, you know, I mean, it was fun. Fun for an editor isn't fun for a normal person. Let's just put it that way, okay? We were enjoying you get a great satisfaction out of making something work if you're an editor. And that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, you know, just making it reach its potential was the fun part for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think one of the best things about our profession is the idea that often you go home every night feeling satisfied from solving all these puzzles. And that always feels good. In terms of which scene, that's hard to say. I mean, the dream scenes with Freddie, you know, timing Freddie coming through the mirror or showing up in the bedroom, the coming back to reality, that was kind of a lot of fun to do. The bathtub scene, I wouldn't call that fun, but there were some danger, some weird emotions we were dealing with there that I would say, I would use the word more intense than fun.
Well, I feel like that's where we end. Thank you both so much. This was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks very much.